Back when I first talked about Avengers Disassembled, I mentioned how this was supposed to launch a new era for the team, but I didn't really talk about how that new era was launched, really. What happened was a bunch of new number ones came out. Basically, New Avengers would be the most obvious. Spider-Man got a new ongoing series as he was joining the Avengers team. There was a new ongoing series for Iron Man, and there was a new number one for Captain America.
Taking over as writer for this new Captain America was Ed Brubaker, an unabashed fan of the character. Brubaker drew upon his knowledge to change the status quo of Captain America that would have ramifications felt outside the world of comic books. Moving on to issue 1, we open up 5 years before the events of the comic. The Red Skulls engage in a conversation with former KGB leader Alexander Lukin. The two continue their conversation as they enter a warehouse where the Skull notices something being stored in a large tube. Lukin offers it to the Skull in exchange for one thing: the Cosmic Cube.
Debuting in the 79th issue of the Tales of Suspense series, the Cosmic Cube is an energy storing device that, when fully charged, allows the person who wields it the ability to shape reality in their own image. Those of you more familiar with the Marvel Cinematic Universe would know this device better as the Tesseract.
The Skull laughs at Lukin's offer. If anyone is to use the Cosmic Cube, it'll be him. We then flash forward to the present, where the Red Skull sips a glass of wine as he quietly celebrates his new possession: a Cosmic Cube.
Now, this incarnation of the Cosmic Cube that the Skull currently possesses is actually made of the remnants of previous cubes. And the Skull is planning to charge this cube by setting off a series of weapons of mass destruction in New York City.
Meanwhile, we see Captain America, Steve Rogers, as he's being visited by S.H.I.E.L.D. Agent 13 and ex-girlfriend Sharon Carter. No relation. Sharon is concerned about Steve's recent actions. He recently took on a small group of terrorists and put one in a coma and killed 2 others and injured 4 civilians in doing so.
Oh yeah, sure. No one has a problem when Cap causes collateral damage and injures people. But when Superman does it, everyone just starts throwing a hissy fit about it. It goes both ways, that's all I'm saying.
Steve explains to Sharon that the reason he's been on edge is because he feels the Skull is planning something big. He's been feeling the Skull's presence non-stop, a feeling that has turned out to be all too true, as the disguised Skull can be seen eavesdropping on Cap. We return to the Skull's office, where he receives a phone call from Alexander Lukin. As the Skull mocks Lukin, a small crash is heard, and the Skull collapses on the floor dead. An unknown individual then enters the office and steals the Cosmic Cube. We open up issue 2 on a battle in World War II. Cap and his sidekick Bucky, along with the rest of the super team known as the Invaders, make their way through the Nazi forces. Cap then looks over to Bucky, who has been shot and is slowly bleeding to death.
Turns out to be entirely a dream as Cap wakes up. He knows that's not how Bucky was killed. And no, Bucky didn't fall off a train either.
Steve then receives a phone call from Sharon. He is taken to the crime scene at the Skull's office. Cap is initially in denial that the Skull is actually dead.
Now, it should be noted that this incarnation of the Red Skull is a failed clone of Steve Rogers that had the mind of the Red Skull implanted into it. That's why S.H.I.E.L.D. has to run a DNA test. Anyway, as Cap's DNA is being taken, another S.H.I.E.L.D. scientist makes note that the Skull is in possession of a Cosmic Cube.
Cap and Sharon take to the sewers after tracking down one of the locations of the Skull's explosives. They manage to take out every one of the Skull's agents except for one: Crossbones, the Skull's top assassin. Crossbones also overhears Cap and Sharon talking about the Skull's death.
Debuting in Captain America number 359, Crossbones is an expert fighter who has equaled Cap on many occasions. He actually plays a bigger part in later parts of the Brubaker run, not so much here outside of another little appearance.
Cap and the S.H.I.E.L.D. team make their way to London, where it seems another cube powering attack had been planned. Cap has another misremembered flashback about Bucky's death. Upon arrival in London, they find out that this attack was not planned by the Red Skull, but rather by AID, a spin-off of AIM.
Advanced Idea Mechanics, or AIM, were first mentioned in issue 142 of Strange Tales, and then made their first appearance in issue number 78 of Tales of Suspense. They're a group of techno-terrorists, using technology in order to conquer the world.
Cap and the S.H.I.E.L.D. crew make quick work of the AIM lackeys. We then cut to a bar in western Pennsylvania. A bar patron named Jack claims to have worked with Captain America in the past. He gets laughed out of the bar. As he walks through the parking lot, a shadowy figure approaches Jack and kills him. Jack Monroe is dead.
Monroe actually has a fairly convoluted backstory. He was part of a second attempt at Captain America and Bucky in the 1950s, except in this case the super soldier serum that they were given resulted in both Cap and Bucky developing psychotic tendencies, and they were both placed in suspended animation. After he was revived and rehabilitated, Monroe later adopted the identity of Nomad.
Nick Fury calls in Sharon Carter with some startling evidence. It turns out the fingerprints on the gun used to take out the skull are a match for Jack Monroe. Sharon is then dispatched to Philadelphia, where Monroe is believed to have been living. Cap, meanwhile, has been sent to Arlington National Cemetery, where someone has defaced the graves of two men, William Naslund and Jeffrey Mace.
Now, these two men were both patriotic superheroes during World War II. Naslund was the Spirit of 76, the only American hero on a British super team, and Mace was the Patriot. He operated on American soil, fighting off Nazi spies and the like. Both these men would later adopt the mantle of Captain America after Cap was put on ice for a while.
As Cap leaves the cemetery, he gets attacked by Crossbones. While they fight, Cap begins having flashbacks to the encounter with Baron Zemo where Bucky died. However, it appears that the memories continue to be altered. Meanwhile, in Philadelphia, Sharon has tracked down Monroe's S.H.I.E.L.D. signal to a rundown building. As she enters, she is attacked by an unknown assailant. At the beginning of issue 5, Captain America meets with Nick Fury at Fury's office. Fury informs Cap about Lucan and that they have identified him as the man behind the Skull's murder. Lucan's name doesn't ring a bell with Cap, but the name of Lucan's mentor does, Vasily Karpov. Cap flashes back to a battle he and the invaders had outside of a small Russian village named Kronos. Cap's team fights off the Nazis alongside a group of Russian soldiers led by Karpov. Karpov brutally tortures several Nazi prisoners, much to Cap's displeasure. As the battle rages on, the village is completely engulfed in flames. In the wreckage, Karpov finds a young man named Alexander. As Cap exits the office, Fury looks over a file on his desk. A file marked Winter Soldier. Cap visits a small island in the English Channel. It turns out that this is the place where he and Bucky had their final adventure. As he inspects the area, he's suddenly jumped by a group of Nazi soldiers. However, this too turns out to be a hallucination. Leaving the island, Cap suddenly gets a vision of Sharon bound and gagged. Cap then jets off to Philadelphia to rescue her. Arriving in Philadelphia, Cap makes his way towards Sharon. Upon being freed, Sharon explains to Cap that she caught a glimpse of the Red Skull's killer. It appears that the Red Skull's killer is Bucky, Cap's former sidekick. The man believed to be Bucky then presses a small detonator, activating a large series of explosions, which finally powers Lucan's cosmic cube.
Debuting in Captain America Comics #1 in 1941, James Buchanan Barnes was Captain America's loyal friend and sidekick throughout World War II. He died when he got hung up on a weaponized drone plane that was headed for the United States that he and Cap were trying to redirect away. Now, the funny thing about Bucky's death is it didn't actually happen in a Captain America comic. It was only mentioned in Avengers #4 when Captain America's body was discovered. Though throughout the years, a lot of creators would hint at a possible Bucky return. They would say things like, they never officially found a body, or clones or robotic lookalikes would show up. And Ed Brubaker picked up on this and used that as the foundation to bring back Bucky. Though the decision to bring Bucky back was met with quite a bit of fan outcry. Bucky had been one of the guys who had died and actually managed to stay dead throughout most of comics, joining the ranks of Spider-Man's Uncle Ben, Gwen Stacy, and of course Spider-Man's good buddy, Rocket Racer.
Issue 7 is a chronicle of the final few days of Jack Monroe's life. It opens up with him being diagnosed with a terminal illness, possibly cancer. He then flashes back as his time with Captain America of the 50s, his partnering with Steve Rogers as Nomad. He then beats up a group of drug dealers working near the school of his adopted daughter, and the story ends with his eventual killing at the hands of the Winter Soldier. In issue 8, as a S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier flies over the wreckage of Philadelphia, Nick Fury begins to give Cap the background on the Winter Soldier. It appears that it is indeed Bucky, though Cap is still in denial. Cap then flashes back to the previous night, where he managed to get a look at the Winter Soldier, though Bucky doesn't recognize his own name. Returning to the present, Cap takes out his frustrations on the S.H.I.E.L.D. view screen. We then flash back to 1945. A Soviet submarine discovers something floating in the waters just off the English Channel. The mangled, barely alive body of Bucky Barnes. Captain America, Nick Fury, and S.H.I.E.L.D. fly into Western Russia to take out Lukin at his Kronos Corporation headquarters. LLC. Trademark. Registered. I got nothing. Anyway, as the team makes their way to Lukin's office, we find a member of the White House staff in there trying to cut a business deal with Lukin. After the White House staff member chastises Cap and everyone else, the team makes their way back home.
Issue 10 is a rather pointless one-shot that crosses over with Marvel's House of M event that was going on at the time. It's not necessarily bad, it just causes the Winter Soldier storyline to grind to a complete halt. It's just aggravating. I mean, imagine you were watching Return of the King, and then suddenly, right before the climactic battle of Mount Doom, we get a story where we find out what would have happened if Isildur had just thrown the ring into Mount Doom to begin with. Like I said, not necessarily bad, but when you're looking for one particular story to end, you kind of want to find out how that ends before you find out this other one.
In issue 11, we get a brief look at the Kronos Corporation headquarters. Lukin seems to slowly be losing his grip on the reality, and the Cosmic Cube appears to be responsible. Back at his apartment in Brooklyn, Steve Rogers finds a mysterious package labeled Winter Soldier. Inside, he finds an overview of the soldier's history. It starts off with Bucky's brainwashing by Lukin's mentor Vasily Karpov. Next, we get an overview of several assassinations pulled off by the Winter Soldier. Then we get a brief story about an attempted rebellion where Bucky disappeared for 3 weeks until he was discovered in New York City. Upon completing the reading of this file, Steve Rogers hangs his head in acceptance. Cap discusses the file he received with Sharon and Fury. He believes that given the previous incident in the 70s where Bucky disappeared, Bucky's programming could be reversed, and thus Cap would not have to kill him. Meanwhile, Lukin uses the Cosmic Cube to force the heads of several major American corporations into a merger with his Kronos Corporation.
Boy, that Alexander Lukin, he's certainly a big thinker. The Cosmic Cube for business deals. What a threat.
After the meeting, Lukin collapses in the hallway outside the office. He then attacks his aide for trying to pick up the Cosmic Cube that he dropped while having his episode. As this is taking place, Cap is out on patrol in an attempt to blow off some steam. After breaking up a mugging, he then gets a visit from an old friend, the Falcon.
Debuting in Captain America number 117, Sam Wilson has held many occupations, from pimp to social worker to superhero. He has a harness that enables him to fly, and a pet falcon named Redwing with whom he shares a telepathic link.
Issue 13 begins with the Cap and Falcon discussing recent events. Cap explains that he has to try to save Bucky. Meanwhile, Lukin, after the attack on his aide, gives the Cosmic Cube to the Winter Soldier. The words of the Red Skull begin to echo in Lukin's head. Later, Cap and Falcon are joined by Iron Man in an attack on an AIM hideout. The trio takes out a giant mech, and they manage to save 2 scientists for interrogation on how to track a cosmic cube. After using the information given to them, Iron Man manages to track down the Winter Soldier's location. Tony Stark is forced to drop out, though, citing a recent attempt at a Stark Industries takeover by Kronos, and any action Tony Stark takes against Lucan could be seen as an act of corporate espionage.
Cap gives a silent understanding to the removal of Iron Man from the events. This actually shows real evolution in their rather contentious history. Steve's idealism often clashes with Tony's business sense. Heck, Cap once refused to use a shield Stark had specially made for him because of Tony's Department of Defense contracts.
Cap calls Sharon as he and Falcon head off. Sharon calls in for a strike team and also heads off for a location in West Virginia where Bucky is believed to be located. Upon arriving in West Virginia, Cap and Falcon begin exploring the area. The Winter Soldier draws a bead on them with the rifle and fires. Somehow, the Winter Soldier misses the shot of Falcon, and Cap responds with a shield throw. Lucan's soldiers arrive and try taking on the 2 heroes on their own, but they don't last very long. Finally, Cap and the Winter Soldier face off. During the fight, the Winter Soldier drops the cosmic cube. Cap picks it up and tells Bucky to remember who he is. Bucky struggles as his memories come flooding back to him. Bucky then tells Cap that she should have killed him, as Bucky then grabs the cube and crushes it. In the aftermath of the explosion that occurs, Bucky has disappeared, but Steve knows that Bucky is a survivor. Meanwhile, Lucan looks on over New York City. As he looks at his reflection in the window, he sees the Red Skull staring back.
Overall, I would give Captain America the Winter Soldier a B. It's really good and entertaining, but there are a lot of dead points. Not to mention that infamous crossover issue I talked about. But I would still recommend reading it, especially if you're interested in seeing where the inspiration for a lot of aspects of the Marvel Cinematic Universe came from. Well, as we come to the end of another random trade review, let's see what we'll be doing next time. Well, another event.
Be here Monday, December 1st for Marvel's Secret Invasion.